Thanks for the upgrade, Ethan. Ethan walked into the living room with a cocky grin, tossing his sunglasses onto the coffee table. He stood there, looking proud of himself, dressed in an expensive suit with brand new shoes. His luggage, covered in designer logos, sat beside him. First class to Europe, luxury hotels, this is the kind of life I was meant for, Sarah. I couldn't help myself, I laughed. His smile faded. What's so funny? Oh, Ethan, I said, shaking my head, you have no idea what you've done. A costly mistake. My name is Sarah, and I'm 34 years old. I work in cybersecurity, and for the past 7 years, I've been married to Ethan, a man who turned out to be a walking red flag disguised as charm. Ethan was always a smooth talker, a dreamer with grand ideas. Meanwhile, I was the one keeping us afloat, working a stable job while he bounced from one failed scheme to the next. I ignored the signs, the secrecy about money, the excuses for never having a real income, because I wanted to believe we were a team. But last week, in the middle of the night, Ethan made a mistake he couldn't charm his way out of. While I was sleeping, he sneaked downstairs to my laptop. He used my work computer to access one of my credit cards. He copied the details, took pictures with his phone, and slipped back into bed like nothing had happened. The next morning, while sipping my coffee, I got a flood of alerts on my phone. Nearly $50,000 had been charged, designer clothes, expensive watches, first-class flights to Paris. My stomach sank. Of course, it was Ethan. But instead of panicking, I smiled. Ethan had no idea that the card he used wasn't a real personal account. It was a dummy credit card tied to a fraud detection training program I run at work. Every transaction triggered an alert that went straight to the authorities. Ethan had just reported himself. The setup. I called my lawyer, Chloe. You're not going to believe this, I said, explaining everything. She burst out laughing. Wait, he stole from a dummy card, the one designed to catch fraud? Yep, I said. Wow, he's dumber than I thought. For the rest of the week, I stayed quiet, watching as Ethan drained the fake account on his luxury vacation. Every night, I received notifications, 5-star hotels, fancy restaurants, high-end shopping. Each one was more evidence against him. A few days later, he left a note on the counter. Taking some time for myself, don't wait up. I knew exactly what that meant. He was off to spend more of my stolen money. I let him. 3 days into his spree, I got a call. This is Agent Keller. We've detected fraud on your account. Do you know who might be responsible? Yes, I said, without hesitation. My husband. There was a pause. Your husband? I explained everything. He let out a low whistle. That's a new one, he said. He's in serious trouble. The return. A week later, Ethan strutted back into the house like a king, wearing his stolen designer clothes, acting like he had won the lottery. Thanks for the upgrade, he said smugly. You really outdid yourself this time. I laughed. Ethan frowned. What's so funny? Oh, Ethan, I said, you're about to find out. He dropped his expensive duffel bag onto the floor and stretched like he didn't have a care in the world. Seriously though, Sarah, he continued, you should have told me about that card earlier. Imagine how much fun we could have had. I leaned against the kitchen counter, arms crossed. And how exactly did you think this was going to end? He smirked. You're always so uptight about money. It's not like you couldn't afford it. I figured you'd get over it once you saw how happy it made me. His audacity would have been infuriating if it weren't so pathetic. I bit back a laugh, knowing that every second he spent bragging was another nail in his coffin. Once Ethan disappeared into the shower, humming to himself, I picked up my phone and texted Chloe. He's back, ready to move forward. Her reply was immediate. Perfect, I'll alert Agent Keller. Over the past week, Chloe and Agent Keller had been preparing the case against Ethan. His every move had been tracked, every charge meticulously logged. Ethan had no idea how deep he had dug his own grave. The arrest. Later that evening, as Ethan lounged on the couch, scrolling through his phone, there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find Agent Keller and 2 uniformed officers. Good evening, Ms. Miller, Keller said. Is Ethan home? I smiled. He's right inside. Come on in. Ethan looked up, his brows furrowing in confusion. What's going on? Keller stepped forward. Ethan Miller, you're under investigation for fraud. You need to come with us for questioning. Ethan's face turned pale. Wait, no, this is a mistake. He turned to me. Sarah, tell them this is crazy. I crossed my arms. I don't know, Ethan, you've been pretty busy lately, maybe you should explain it to them. As the officers read him his rights, he protested. You can't do this, Sarah, you're my wife, you're supposed to stand by me. I smirked. Funny, I thought husbands weren't supposed to steal from their wives. Guess we're both learning something new today. As they led him out, he glared at me. You won't get away with this. I smiled. Oh, Ethan. I already have. I stood frozen for a moment, staring at the empty space where Ethan had been just minutes ago. My heart pounded, not with fear, but with the sheer weight of the moment. He was gone, finally, undeniably gone. But this wasn't over, not yet. About an hour later, my phone buzzed. It was Chloe. He's in with Agent Keller now, she said, her voice calm but firm. They've started questioning him. From what Keller told me, Ethan is already trying to spin the story in his favor. I let out a bitter laugh. Of course he is. Let me guess, he's playing the victim. Spot on, Chloe replied with a dry chuckle. He's claiming you gave him permission to use the card. But don't worry, between the fraud alerts, the charges, and your recording, he doesn't stand a chance. The next morning, Agent Keller called with an update. We've got everything we need, he said. Your husband, soon-to-be ex-husband, admitted to using the card but insists he didn't know it was tied to a fraud detection program. He's trying to blame the mix-up on you. That sounds about right, I said, leaning back in my chair. What happens next? We're moving forward with the charges, Keller explained. He's facing multiple counts of fraud and unauthorized use of a financial account. Given the amount of money involved, he'll be looking at serious consequences. The buyer protection programs flagged his luxury purchases, so those are being reimbursed. You're not liable for a cent. Relief washed over me like a wave. 4 days, I had carried the weight of Ethan's actions, worried that somehow he'd managed to slip through the cracks. But now, hearing Keller's confidence, I realized the full extent of my victory. Thank you, I said sincerely, for everything. Don't thank me, Keller said. This case practically solved itself. You handled this brilliantly. Ethan's downfall was swift. Word spread quickly among our mutual friends and acquaintances about his arrest, and his carefully crafted image of the charming, carefree husband began to crumble. Nicole, the woman I suspected he had been seeing, dropped him the moment she heard about the charges. The designer goods he had flaunted were confiscated. The flights he had booked were cancelled. The banks froze his accounts. One evening, my phone rang from an unfamiliar number. Against my better judgment, I answered, and sure enough, it was Ethan. Sarah, he said, his voice low and drained. I need to talk to you. I couldn't help but laugh. Ethan, the only thing you need to do is figure out how to explain yourself to the judge. Please, he begged, desperation creeping into his voice. I messed up, okay? I didn't mean for it to go this far. I was just what? I interrupted, my tone ice cold. Just trying to steal $50,000 from me, just hoping I wouldn't notice, just assuming I'd be too blind or too forgiving to stop you. Silence, then, finally, a pathetic whisper. I thought you loved me. I exhaled sharply, my anger boiling over. I did, Ethan. I loved the person I thought you were, but the person who stole from me, who lied to me, who thought he could get away with it, that's not someone I could ever love. Before he could say another word, I hung up. A week later, Chloe called with news. He took a plea deal. Let me guess, probation and community service? Pretty much, she confirmed. He won't see jail time, but he has to pay back every cent he tried to steal. His credit is wrecked for years. I smiled. Sounds fitting. He always wanted the high life. Now he gets to see how the other half lives. Chloe chuckled. You're handling this better than most people would. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling. For years, I thought Ethan was the one holding things together. I thought his charm, his ambition, his big ideas were what kept us moving forward. But now, I see it clearly, I was the one holding everything up. He was just dead weight. The day the divorce papers arrived, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on the couch, looking around the apartment that now felt wholly and completely mine. Ethan's absence wasn't a loss, it was a gift. A chance to rebuild my life without the constant shadow of his selfishness. I thought back to the moment he had walked through the door, flaunting his stolen goods and mocking me for the supposed upgrade he had given himself. He had been so confident, so sure of his own brilliance, and now, he was the one paying the price. For the first time in years, I felt truly free. This wasn't just the end of a marriage, it was the beginning of a life I could finally call my own. In the days after Ethan's arrest, the apartment felt different. His things were gone, what little he hadn't sold or stuffed into his duffel bag, but more importantly, the weight of his lies had lifted. For the first time in years, I could sit in my own home without feeling like I was sharing the space with a ghost of broken promises. Chloe stopped by one afternoon with some final paperwork. "How are you holding up?" she asked, taking a seat on the couch. "Better than I thought I would," I admitted, handing her a cup of coffee. "It's strange, but I don't even feel angry anymore, just relieved." She smiled knowingly. "That's because you've already won. You didn't just survive this, Sarah, you came out stronger." I thought about that as we finalized the details of Ethan's financial restitution. It wasn't just about the money, though knowing he'd be paying it back was satisfying. It was about reclaiming my independence. For years, I had let Ethan dictate the terms of our relationship, thinking it was easier to keep the peace. But now, I realized that peace built on compromise and silence wasn't peace at all. A week later, the official letter of divorce arrived in an unassuming envelope. I held it for a moment, letting its significance sink in before carefully tearing it open. My eyes scanned the lines of legal jargon until I found the words that mattered most: finalized and irrevocable. I sat down at the kitchen table, the letter in my hands, and allowed myself a rare moment of reflection. This wasn't the life I had imagined when I married Ethan. I had pictured stability, partnership, and a future built on mutual trust. But now, as I looked around the home I had rebuilt for myself, I realized I had something better: freedom, clarity, and the knowledge that I was stronger than I had ever given myself credit for. I raised my glass to the night sky. "Here's to me," I whispered, "here's to starting over." And with that, I closed the chapter on Ethan for good, ready to embrace whatever came next.